Okay, is everyone ready to start? Got a lot of power on this side. With the exception of Warren, we got a lot of feminine power, which I love. So,
Okay.
cool. Okay, so today's mic for questions is this blue one right here. So if I hand it to you, okay, just hold it and talk. Those online will be able to hear. And
I like to throw it, so I'll get ready to catch it. So
Josh will be tossing it. So Josh and I will be co-presenting today. How many of you know Josh Enfield? Do you guys know who Josh is?
Stephanie, money's in the mail.
Josh, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself? I know you present a lot, but let's...
Okay, 30 seconds real quick. I served in the military, did interrogations. I also spent some time in Congress, working in politics, and been in the industry for about 10 years. And I love doing presentations and helping people learn how to negotiate better their deals. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Jumpstart program?
Jumpstart program. I help new agents learn start to finish what they need to do in the industry. So any questions you guys have, whether it's marketing, social media, I am a producer as well. And so I can give you guys some direction on how to really thrive and garner some interest in your properties and prospecting buyers. So
yeah, Josh is over the Enfield team, and his team is a good producing team. So if you're looking for ways to improve your business, pull him aside sometime. So, okay, cool. Well, today's class is going to be mostly centered around the last two classes. So we do apologize in advance if a lot of this is a repeat. What we've noticed is now that we have the NAR settlement put into place and things are in practice, we're now seeing real life examples come back, and we're wanting to share those with you, okay, as well as a number of many other things. Before we get in, we do want to thank our sponsors who are here with us today. We're going to give them an opportunity to present and let us know what they do. So we're going to start with Warren McCarthy with McCarthy Media. Take the mic.
Okay, thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you guys. And so my name is Warren. I am a photographer and videographer for McCarthy Media. I run McCarthy Media, a all-in-one listing service for your listing needs.
She's out of town till Monday.
Needs,
She's
is.
in Mexico.
And I'll just provide a little bit of backstory. So I see some friends.
Do you need like a broker
Stephanie,
question?
Natalie, you guys are awesome. They're so much fun. But I just also
we can ask Josh. He's the one with the super short red hair down there. He's gonna run them.
Real estate photo and video oriented. I actually was working in the operating room last year prior to May 15th as an anesthesia technician, assisting the anesthesiologist at the head of the bed, spiking blood, like pushing meds, stuff like that. But I really wanted to take a step back from the medicine roots, because that's like from medical school, residency, fellowship, attending status thereafter. I wanted to teach in the medical school. I wanted to run a lab with a few PhDs and do anesthesia research. However, I was like, that's a lot of like full-time gigs, like all meshed into one, where being a physician in general, you already have family as a back burner topic. So I'm really trying to put family first. And that's why I started out with real estate, photo, and video. Not only does it kind of open me up to doing like things that I love to do, things that I'm honestly passionate about doing. I love helping not only you guys, but I love interacting with clients. I love interacting with home sellers, establishing rapport. And my ultimate goal for you guys is to have like the clients that I'm helping work with, they turn into absolute referral machines for you guys. Like that's my ultimate goal. And like establishing rapport, having incredible, impeccable customer service is honestly my goal. And then I love the people side of real estate. I love interacting with you guys on the agent side, the home selling side, and like everything in between. And it's just overall, the whole process is just so much fun. And that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm honestly here to be a friend and here to be like of service to you guys, listings wise, photo and video wise. And it's honestly an absolute vibe. And I love working with people who like match the wavelengths, have some good vibes, good energy. And so that's kind of what I do on my end for listing, photo and video wise. And I also have tacos in the back. I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to make sure you guys eat as well. I just have some tacos from South City Tacos. And I swear the tacos are honestly the best. So feel free to like grab a plate, like grab 2, grab 3, grab 4, like however many you need to like kick off the day and just like have some good energy. So, but anyway, that's me, Warren McCarthy with McCarthy Media.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. All right, we also have first rate home loans up here. And if you want, what is it? Coach B? Is that what we call it? Where's the football?
Caught off guard this morning, sorry, but Coach Me, the mortgage coach, I represent first rate home loans. We are a mortgage broker. What does that mean? That means that we don't work for XYZ mortgage company. We don't work for a bank. We work for your clients. Our job is to understand your clients' individual needs and put them into the best rate and product or service that is best for them. So we're not trying to push a round product into a square hole. Our job, again, is to find the right product and service. It is science. I'm going to tell you this last thing. Our clients, people that work with brokers, save $10,626 over going with a big bank over the life of a loan. So that's buying power that you can turn around and put back into your client, that they can buy a little bit more home than if they went with a regular bank. Again, we're first rate home loans. I've got my partners here. We got Tanya, we got Melissa, Natalie. They're in the back there. If you have any questions or concerns, again, we work with over 40 different lenders. So if you have, or if your clients have a will, we have a way to get them into a home. First rate home loans.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. And Stephanie, secure.
Oh, yes. Stephanie with Secure Title, come on down. The price is right.
Hi, I am Stephanie with Secure Title. I love Warren. Warren does an amazing job on his photography, just an FYI. You should follow him on Instagram. He's amazing. So, but I'm Stephanie. I'm with Secure Title. We have offices right here at the end of the building and one in Orem. We are mobile. We offer mobile after hours closings. I'm typically available late at night till about 9. That's when I go to sleep. We like to make sure you guys are taken care of. So if you need a new title person or you want to see what we have, our cards are up at the front with me and Heather, as well as we have a new app that should be up available in the next week that gives you seller net sheets, buyer net sheets, quoting service, and that should be up next week. So if you want access to that, just let us know.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Steph. And Warren, I'm guessing that if they want those tacos, they can have them now.
Oh,
They don't. So if you're hungry, you want to go get food now, I won't feel offended if you stand up and go grab it. Or if you want to wait till after, we'll leave that up to you. Okay. And I believe there's drinks with them as well, right?
Water, there's Gatorade, there's tacos.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And we do want to thank our vendors for sponsoring and being here. They're not just giving their time, but they're giving their money in order to build a relationship. And really that's what this business is an opportunity to have a good relationship with various professionals in our industry. So, and the people who have presented today, I've worked with them personally. I think they're wonderful. Take the time to get to know them. So, okay.
So just to start off, Dave, there's some frequently asked questions we want to go over. The first one is for buyer broker agreements. Can a buyer have multiple people represent them simultaneously? And what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So now hold on. Before we jump into this, can I just mention a few things? We have a number of people online. They're going to be asking questions. We're going to try to be sensitive to the questions that they're asking and try to answer those as well. What we haven't done in the past is shared our screen. So that's the number one complaint we've had with those who are on Zoom online. We are now testing sharing the screen. So those online should be able to see this screen, okay? As I mentioned at the very beginning, we are now going to be going over the practical results of the NAR settlement being put into force. And back to your question, Josh, let's start with that first one. The answer is yes, Okay, and obviously Josh has put some of the answers off to the side. We've already heard that we all hate this, or at least this portion, right? It's the real question that comes up is, what good is the buyer broker agreement if there can be multiple people representing at once, okay? And we're going to leave this up to you. What I've seen agents do in practice is under the geography section of the buyer broker agreement, a lot of agents are stating the whole state of Utah, okay? Or every county in Utah. Can you put that in there? We've been told yes, you can, okay? However, if your buyer broker agreement says Utah County, can another agent legally represent them in Salt Lake County? Yes, the answer is yes. So there is the ability to have a dual agency where dual agency was a no-no in the past, okay?
Also, if you make your buyer broker agreement in regards to a specific property, then you're only doing that one property. And so there's a section on, and we'll show you the buyer broker agreement here in a second. But
yeah.
So the next question is, can I put to be determined for commissions or leave it blank?
No. Yeah, and in fact, we've seen this already. We saw was it a listing agreement that came in?
We've seen both. Yeah.
We have seen both, okay, where we saw TBD, which would be a huge violation of the NAR settlement. No, you have to put down an amount, okay? Now, what we have encouraged in the previous courses is that on the buyer broker agreement, since it is a no-no to go up in value or go up in compensation, it's better to start high and then move down. Okay, so there are some agents who have come to me and said, Dave, can I put 5% on that buyer broker agreement and then just come down from there? And the answer is yes, yes, you can. Okay? You may have to explain why you're putting 5% on there and your strategy behind that. The hard thing is when it comes to enforcement, you may have some buyers who balk and say, well, I don't want to be committed to 5% of the purchase price, you know, so there's going to be some trust that has to be established there and some clear expectations given. So.
All right. So the next one is, can I increase my commission later in the relationship?
Okay. We put no, but the answer is it depends. I've been over this before. You will notice there's some fine print in the agency agreement, specifically the buyer broker agreement, that says that an increase in compensation is not allowed. Okay. And the reason why we put it depends is the only way that you can increase in compensation is if you're offering additional services, okay? If you're doing something that would be classified as a specialist, I'm a new home specialist, or I'm a short sale specialist, or a foreclosure specialist, therefore I'm going to charge more. If you're not offering any type of specialty, then once again, the strategy should be start high and reduce your commission if the listing is offering less compensation and you're okay receiving less compensation, okay? And by the way, unlike the other courses, we are fine if you want to interrupt at any point, okay?
Just raise your hand and I'll give you the mic. Okay, so here's the buyer broker agreement. Dave, if you want to walk through that. And
yeah, so a lot of changes here. We talked about that section where you can put whether or not you're going to represent them in any specific geography, such as, you know, any certain county or a property. And this section would be used for clients who don't yet feel comfortable being represented on every single home. They're okay with you showing them properties, answering questions, but maybe you haven't built that rapport with them yet and they're not 100% ready to sign on board with you. But this is a way to just show them one property or represent them on one property, okay? Yes, now hold on. Just because the people online need to hear you.
It's not gonna be that good. I was just thinking the trick would be if you put a specific property while you're getting to know each other, to remember to go back, you'd have to do an addendum or redo I guess an addendum would be appropriate.
Yes. Yep, you're spot on.
Yeah.
Yep. The best way to do it, rather than getting a whole brand new buyer broker agreement, would be to get an addendum that then modifies, and you could specifically state section 1.2 of the buyer broker agreement to be changed to every property in the state of Utah, something like that, okay? By the way, I do like this change. We saw often, I just want to back up a little bit, we saw quite often agents who would immediately expire out their buyer broker agreements. Maybe you've accidentally done that. We've seen agency agreements come in where the date that they would put up here was the date they intended the agreement to start, not expire. And we did have some commission disputes where clients came back and said, I have no intention to pay you. I have no intention to pay the other side. And I'm glad that they clarified, because especially on the listing agreement was a little confusing because that line where the date was made it look like it was the start date, not the end date. So I like that it now specifies that, okay?
Want to mention this real quick?
Oh, yeah. Okay, the buyer does have a representation agreement with another brokerage for the following properties, and these properties are excluded from this exclusive buyer broker agreement. Okay, so in the past, if you recall, and this coincided with the Code of Ethics, it was, I don't know if the right word's unlawful, unethical, to solicit somebody who was already represented, okay? Now the question is, are you represented on any other property? And then this is basically that disclosure. Okay, this is where the buyer would then say, yes, I am. I have another agent who showed me a property located in Sugar House, and then you would identify that, okay?
And that will protect both you and the clients from paying double commissions.
So it's gonna turn into the Wild West, the realtors fighting for different people.
Hold on, wait. Say that question again.
I just said, is this gonna turn into the Wild West
Um,
of realtors fighting over clients and things like that? Cause that was a, pretty well maintained before with the, like you were saying, with the Code of Ethics.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I hope it doesn't become Wild Wild West. I mean, we are playing by rules, whereas the Wild Wild West really doesn't have any rules. Will it become more competitive? I think in some regards, yes. I think we're going to see, we have some real life examples that have already come back that we will share.
So is it possible that a buyer doesn't want to sign with a specific agent? So you got that section that you just covered up. They're going to have specific properties. They might have 10, 12 specific properties with all different agents. Are you listing agents or just properties?
This one is specifically the buyer broker. Yeah, but you are correct. Listing would be different because we
No,
still.
I didn't mean listing, but I meant for the buyer. If the buyer is going out and they don't want to sign something with a specific agent, they may be seeing properties with 12 agents.
Yes,
All of those properties would be listed there.
should be
That
listed.
would be
Yeah,
odd.
yep. Mhm.
Thank you. So, okay, I guess back up a little bit, thank you. On those two area where it says only located within, can we put any county and in any location, then that would cover all the area?
Yep,
Okay,
yep. I've seen agents put any and every county in the state.
and
of
in
Utah.
every, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
That's what I use.
Yes. He said that's what he does, so, yeah. I
Unless
think
you don't
that-
want to drive down somewhere like Washington County, if that's out of your realm,
Yeah,
you probably don't need
yeah.
to put that in there.
And I think that is a partial answer to your question, but we're gonna give some examples we've already seen, so, yeah.
All right, so that takes us to this section, the 2.1.
Yeah, so now let's talk about compensation. And preceding this, I actually want to start out by telling you that our secondary commission form will be phased out, okay? And what's interesting about the secondary commission form, a lot of you don't know this, but right around 2010, there was another lawsuit that was playing out in California against Realology. They're now Anywhere Real Estate. And if you're wondering who Anywhere is. They are the company that is not a party to this NAR lawsuit. They're the ones who own Coldwell, ERA, Summit Sotheby's, I think, a whole list, Century 21. They're settling their portion on their own, okay? If you didn't know that detail, it's an interesting detail. But they were a party to a huge lawsuit in California where companies were charging administrative fees, like we charge, okay? But not giving full disclosure on that, and they lost that lawsuit and had to pay out. Our attorney at the time said, to protect yourself, if you're charging anything that is an additional commission, you need to have that on a secondary commission form, okay? Our secondary commission form, from what we've been told, is now technically a violation of the NAR settlement, which means if you're going to charge administrative, the $395 Realtypath administrative fee, that should go into your dollar section up here, okay? So just know that we will be phasing out of the secondary commission form. In practice, the majority of you are already doing this because a few years ago, our buyer broker agreement shifted from the word or to the word and. So it was just easy to put in the administrative fee here and whatever commission you wanted to make there, okay? So just be aware of that. If for those of you who may still be using the secondary commission form, it will go away, okay? And usually the scenarios where we see the secondary commission form being used is where you forgot to charge the client that, and now you want to, and you want to slip that in at closing. You shouldn't be doing that. It should be an addendum. If you forgot to put $395 up here and you want to charge your client that, you should go in with an addendum and state something along the lines of Realtypath charges a $395 administrative fee. You agree to pay that. Say that again. Do you?
I feel like that term better than secondary.
Yeah. And in fact, agents hated the term secondary commission.
I don't love secondary commission
Yeah.
because it sounds like, oh, and I also want this money too.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So we actually modified it. It's now up to $995. Yep. And yes. So we do have some agents who will take that secondary commission fee or administrative fee, right? Commission of $395. You can take it up to $995. The reason why we've capped it is we have seen some questionable behavior from some of our agents that we want to get under control. We've seen some scenarios where the secondary, it's not up here anymore, but where the secondary commission or the dollar amount was actually higher than the percentage. And we just want to put our eyes on it. Anything that looks fishy, we want to put our eyes on it. So you are allowed to go up to $995. Realtypath retains the $395. Anything above $395, you would get, okay? But if you want to go higher, we will allow you to go higher, but you just need our approval. And usually the cases where we see that is where there's leftover concessions. And the lender says, either this goes back to the seller or we can give it to you, brokerage, as additional commission. So go ahead.
It's probably silly now, but you take like disciplinary action against agents like that? Because that seems so shady.
The answer is yes. If we see any behavior, and we have, especially with a company of our size, throughout the years, Josh knows this, we've sat down with agents where their behavior has been questionable. We've asked them to leave. Usually we'll bring it up. We'll say, why are you doing this? Unfortunately, it's some of the scenarios that we've seen are where English is a second language for the client, and we can see that. And then when we reach out to the client, here they are signing an all English contract and their language is, let's say, Spanish. That's where we want to put some extra eyes on it and say, does this client know that they're being charged exorbitant fees and why? So yes, good question.
Okay, so that takes us to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Same question, can I put to be determined commissions, leave it blank?
No. However, you and I chatted about this. Can there be a range? The answer is yes. However, there needs to be a justification for the range. So if you were to put, I will charge 2 to 4% commission, and then in an addendum to the exclusive right to sell agreement, you identify why there's a spread, that is allowed. And you can say, you know, for these services, I'm only going to charge 2%. However, for these services, I'm going to charge 4%. The range would be allowed, okay? But it still needs to be, you can't leave it vague. Like you couldn't say, well, maybe it'll fall somewhere in between. Like it really needs to be pretty black and white where you're saying I'm charging 2% for these services or 4% for these services, okay?
Why would there be a difference?
In compensation? One thing that I often see with a lot of our agents, especially agents who are trying to win the listing, and the gentleman who asked about the Wild Wild West, this is one area that I think will make our industry more competitive, is coming in and saying, I'll list your home at a discounted rate. You know, if the agents average a certain rate up here, we got to move away from the language standardized, right? That's what got us into trouble in the first place. But if you're trying to sell your services and while you're sitting down in a listing presentation and you're trying to win that listing and they're looking at you compared to a whole bunch of other listing agents, and you say, well, on average, I tend to be cheaper, but I give you a handful of services. I give you option A. For option A, I'll throw your property up on the MLS. For option B, I'll throw your property up on the MLS and pay for photos and a sign. And so stuff like that, where it's kind of an a la carte service. Yep. Another one that we are seeing as a result of this lawsuit is if I sell your home, it's 2%. If there's a buyer's agent involved, it's 4%. Okay. In the past, that was called dual variance. The language dual variance has gone away, but is that now legal and allowable? The answer is yes. So it's usually an a la carte service where you're offering various services that you could offer variation in compensation.
You've probably heard the term too, variable rate. There's also an option too. If you say, hey, if you bring the buyer, I charge this amount to help you. If I bring the buyer, this is what I charge you. So there's a few options there.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so that takes us to the next question. So if I have one set of compensation, okay, we just talked about that. So can I increase my commission later in the relationship?
And this is on exclusive right to sell, right?
Listing.
Yes, but the same answer applies to the ERS as it does to the BBA, okay? And technically, if you're going to be charging more, it should coincide with additional services offered.
So let's pull up the listing agreement. I've got a glare. Is that the right one?
You're good.
No, it's compensation.
You have the listing agreement up there.
That's it. Okay.
Or did it hide on? Oh, there it is. Yes. Yeah. Let's make sure you are heard.
Yeah, thank you. So for the additional services, so Realtypath is going to create a new form that we present to our customers, or we have to make it up?
You would make it. You would put it. He asked for additional services offered, which would coincide with additional compensation. Are we creating a form that you could use for that? The answer is no. But if you want to put something together like that on an addendum to the exclusive right to sell agreement, you can. Yep. And I highly recommend you get your branch broker approval prior to sending that out, just to make sure you're not getting in trouble with anyone. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. And by the way, we already see this. We saw this even before the NAR suit. We do have a handful of agents who do exactly that, a la carte services, where sometimes their addendum to the exclusive right to sell agreement is pretty comprehensive. Sometimes comprehensive long addenda scare me, but I prefer them more than the vague ones. I'd rather have it detailed out. I think it's more protective. Yep. We operate in a very interesting space in real estate where we're not legally supposed to draft addenda. and yet we do it all the time. So we're not attorneys. We're not supposed to interpret law. We're not supposed to draft. And yet we tend to use language that will bind our client. And my experience has been that the more detailed the addendum, the better, the more protective it is for your client and for you. Cover your rear. So, by the way, the E&O suits that we see, our errors and omissions suits that we see, are sometimes the silliest things where I'm like, man, if the agent had just said a little more, they would have never found themselves in hot water. Right? Or had they run it past their broker first, then they could have bounced these creative ideas off of the broker to find out whether or not it would get them in hot water. So, great question.
Before we review the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, we do have a couple of questions online. We've got a question. I've been told from other agents that when they are showing their own listings, that they do not have to use a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement.
Correct. Okay, so if you didn't hear that question, if you're the listing agent, are you required to get a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement from an unrepresented buyer who wants to come see your listing? And the answer is no. Okay. So back to this gentleman's question, the wild, wild west. I don't think it's going to be wild, wild west, but will competition increase, especially on listings? I think the answer is yes. Maybe for that very purpose, you know, but I think we can help retain the good reputation of our industry by strongly encouraging unrepresented buyers to get representation, right? Even if it means that it'll cost a little bit more, it'll keep the transaction clean, okay? So, but yes, you have the legal right as a listing agent. Part of your services that you offer are to find buyers. And so you are not bound to the same rules that a buyer's agent is. Okay, so if an unrepresented buyer comes along and says, hey, I want to see your listing, you, as per the code of ethics, you still need to say, hey, are you represented? Oh, no, you're not. Great. When would you like to see my client's property? And it would be wise of you to alert them to the benefits of having representation.
So on this note, if I have a listing,
Speak up because
if I have a listing and I request to show me their representation of their buyers, for some reason they forgot to send it and they just open the Supra, go in, show the home, and so that person is in any violation of my.
Hold on, I don't know if I understood your question.
Okay.
You're saying if a buyer's agent.
No, I have a listing.
Okay.
So somebody's request to show my listing,
Hmm.
and I ask if they have the buyer agreement representation. For some reason, they didn't email me that information, or I didn't get anything, but they go in, open the Supra, show the home, and I never received the buyer representation agreement or the form that we have as a Realtypath. So that person is in any violation of open the Supra without our authorization to having an agreement.
Can I ask your question a little bit differently?
Okay.
Are we required as listing agents to verify that a buyer's agent has a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement? The answer is no. We don't have to as listing agents. We can assume that the buyer's agent's done that. Now, if we find out that they haven't, you know, this goes back to the previous two courses that I taught. We are a self-policing industry now, you know. I'm the type of personality that loves to give the person the benefit of the doubt. Mr. Buyer's agent, are you aware that you're in violation of the NAR settlement? Oh yeah, but this client just didn't want to sign anything. Well, I will probably need to report you, you know. But are you required as a listing agent to verify that beforehand? No. You don't have to verify. If a buyer's agent calls you and says, hey, I have a client who wants to see your property, schedule the showing. You're good. You don't need to verify whether or not they've done their job. They're playing with hot water for not doing their job. And if you find out, do you have an ethical obligation to report? hopefully your conscience would say yes, or at least warn them, hey, by the way, you really should get a showing agreement. You're playing with hot water and you need to get that fixed. So, yeah.
All right, we got one more quick question. If I do have a listing and an unrepresented buyer wants to buy the home, do I use an unrepresented buyer form? And how does my commission get affected?
Great question. Okay, so one thing that didn't change is whether or not you go the route of limited agency or you go the route of unrepresented buyer, okay? You can still do both. Pros and cons. You are taking on more liability to a certain degree, in my opinion, after many, many years in observing unrepresented buyers versus limited agency. I think you do take on a little bit more liability being a limited agent, okay? But as long as you get all the forms signed and you discuss what limited agency is and both parties understand that should reduce your liability, okay? As far as compensation is concerned, it's the same. As a listing agent, if you have already negotiated your listing agreement, which you have, and you bring in a buyer, are you entitled to whatever would have gone to a buyer's agent? The commission that would have gone to a buyer's agent? The answer is yes. You can get compensation for that. Now let's talk about number two. If they're unrepresented and you have a discussion with your client, if your agreement somehow stipulates that you get compensation even for an unrepresented buyer, say you put that into an addendum, then you can receive compensation on that. So it is a good question because the old listing agreement had a total percentage that then would be divided up. And now we have compensation broken out between.
Which is a great segue.
Yeah, which is a great segue. You've got compensation both for your listing, okay, and both for your side as well as the buyer's side. What I would highly recommend, and this is where agents will have to be judicious at staying on top of their listing agreements, is if you want to get compensated for an unrepresented buyer, and that's the route you want to go, I would put that in an addendum. I would state, if there's an unrepresented buyer, the seller agrees to pay me X amount more, okay? And if you want to stipulate limited agency, you could say, the seller agrees to pay both the seller's brokerage fee and the buyer's brokerage fee to me as the listing agent as a limited agent. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that there is a section on limited agency underneath here, isn't there? You keep going. Yeah, duties of limited agent. So, which, if you haven't read this, very good to read through the whole agency agreements to fully understand, okay? But I think it is wise to, especially under the scenario of an unrepresented buyer, to stipulate in an addendum that you intend to receive higher compensation if that buyer is unrepresented. It's okay. You got good questions. So.
I guess I'm wondering, if you're presenting this to a buyer, I represent the seller, but I'll still do your paperwork if you want to just be an unrepresented. I mean, what's the advantage to
Can't do that. What you just said, you cannot do. So if you ever offered to draft, what are you being?
Yeah.
You are being a limited agent.
You are.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's unrepresented.
So if it's underrepresented and they say, well, how do I make an offer? You say, I would highly recommend you get a buyer's agent. If not, I would highly recommend that you go find the real estate purchase contract, read through it, present an offer to us. But the moment you give an offer, draft it, you are already acting as a limited agent.
Correct. So
there's a school of thought that is already acting as a limited agent. I would highly recommend that you don't even send the form. You just say, Google the real estate purchase contract, present an offer. Now, here's a little trick that I'd like to teach agents. Present your best offer. If it's messed up, we will clean it up. And I think that's the best route to go. That keeps you out of hot water. But the moment you present a form or even draft it, you are acting as a limited agent.
interesting. I'm sure I've done it wrong in the past.
Okay, don't say that. Strike that from the record. with a different company. Beyond 3 years, right? Statute of limitations, yes. Yeah, exactly. I'm just teasing. You're all good. And not to throw you under the bus, agents do it all the time. We do it all the time. Yeah.
Have you seen where it used to say net and now it says gross? Have you seen any agents try and change it to say net or?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
glad you brought that up. You probably had that in your notes, didn't you? Net versus gross. I'm glad you asked that. So the default language is gross. If you want it net, put it in an addendum to the agency agreement. Yeah.
Last one.
Yeah.
Following up on her question, like builders will have a lot of their own contracts. And so a lot of times the builder's agent will help me if I have a buyer, like fill out the forms. How does that, that's just them being helpful to another agent that's already represented. That's not crossing the limit agency boundary or anything, right?
Some would argue that it is. Your duty as a buyer's agent in a new build would be to review that contract and make sure that you're protecting your client. Technically, a listing agent for a builder really they really shouldn't be involved with the drafting process, but we see it all the time. It tends to be like overlooked kindly, but the fact that you're representing your buyer, that's one reason why I think that part of our industry is protected. You really should be putting eyes on it regardless, but you're absolutely right. A lot of builders will have their own contract and that they will even fill it out and then they'll send it. And the good builders are the ones who will send it to you first and say, does this look good before we send it off to your client for signatures?
Yeah, I had a big 18-page thick one that I had to read through and change some things that was from a builder and I had no idea what it was going to say in it. So that was a fun one.
Yeah, it's not so fun because you get to read through all those and some of the language you're like, wait a minute, I don't like this. They're very protective of the builder, usually.
Yes.
So cool. Was there, ladies, did I see a hand up? Kind of. Let's turn it into a question.
It should be a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering. So something that we always do and we've always done is that we draft our listing agreement and it's for whatever percentage that it is. But then on the MLS, we would say net. But then our title company would then come to us and say, okay, is that net for you too? No, we have an agreement and this is the amount, but we're doing net for the buyer's agent. Because our attitude was always, well, if the buyer's agent's going to kind of beat up our client and everything and us on, say, closing costs and all these sorts of things, we should be raising the price of the house and then they're getting more commission. And we've done this all along, but the point is now with all of this going on, do we need to specify that somewhere on the listing agreement that we do that? Does the seller need to know that that's kind of how we're doing it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
In fact, to answer your question, hold the mic for a minute longer, just in case you have a follow-up. A lot of title companies are asking for agency agreements now, whereas in the past they weren't. So I would say the more detailed, once again, the more detailed, the more protective. So if you're going to have an addendum that says commissions would be paid on net, that would imply both sides. I would specifically say the listing or the seller's brokerage commission will be paid on gross and the buyer's brokerage commission will be paid on net.
So that would just be an addendum.
That would be an addendum
Okay.
to the exclusive right to sell agreement.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. And then it's easy because, yeah, exactly. Otherwise, if it just says net, then you can expect that your commission on the listing side will be net as well.
Okay, we got a couple quick questions here online. So who would you report an agent without a BBA or showing agreement that's showing
So
properties?
the ethics/grievance committee at the Board of Realtors. Okay, because this is a board violation. Now, let me tell you, there's whisperings, rumors that they're trying to force this also into law, which I would appreciate, actually. It would be nice to make it a Utah law thing versus just a board violation. Let me tell you that the board violations often have, say that again. So the beginning of the question was, if you find a buyer's agent who is violating what what would you say, the stipulation from the NAR settlement that you must have a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement prior to showing a property, who do you report it to? And the answer is the ethics/grievance committee at the Board of Realtors, okay? And then the part that I was about to say is I've seen heftier fines from the Board of Realtors than from the Division of Real Estate. So, not to throw that out there as a threat, I'm just telling you what I've seen, I've observed, okay? But it would be nice to see law actually put into place, to have the real estate code altered so that all agents, even those who remove themselves from the NAR, play by the same rules. So,
Yeah. All right, the next question, I work primarily with home builders. Let's see, is there an unrepresented buyer? Oh, if there is an unrepresented buyer, I have to do the contract. I do it either way. Thoughts? I guess the question is, if I'm representing a builder and they have an unrepresented buyer, I'm helping them fill out the paperwork. What position does that put me in?
it still puts them into a limited agency position. The best thing they could do to protect themselves would be, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, here's the contract, read it, fill it out to your best ability, send it back, and we will correct any mistakes. So is it likely that if they're filling it out, someone's going to report them? No, but they already crossed the line of limited agency the moment they draft a contract for a client. I know they're not going to like that answer, but that's just the reality.
Right. All right. So we got another question, but we got to actually review this. Any other thoughts on the exclusive right to sell?
No, I'm just going to repeat that once again. If you were going to throw in your administrative fee in here with the language and do it in here, and then just put whatever commission you intend to make. Okay. So,
all right. So it's
I think that's it on the listing agreement.
Yeah, so that was pretty much the main points there. So let's go back to the notes.
Okay.
All right.
And then we'll jump into the compensation agreement and the real estate purchase contract and what we're seeing in practice versus what the lawyers hoped we would do.
So next week we have the limited showing agreement, and that should be pretty
Josh,
quick.
we got a question over here.
Yeah.
One last question on the on the showing.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering, administratively, I know that we, on our checklist in SkySlow, we have to enter in our buyer broker agreement. For the showing form, if we don't have the buyer agreement, for the showing form, are we required to have that?
Yes. Yeah. So I believe, Josh, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it has already been added as a checklist item, right? Yes.
So that takes us to the showing, listing limited showing agreement. So the limited showing agreement, this is if you're deciding to not get a buyer broker agreement put in place, or they're unwilling and you're willing to show properties for a set price. This is the form that you would use at Realtypath. And so all you got to do is fill in the buyer's information, email, agent representing, and then it clearly puts out the scope and purpose here. And it says this is not representation. So you need to make that very clear with them. I'm not representing you. I'm opening doors for you, pretty much. If you want representation, then we have to sign a separate documentation. Now, you are receiving compensation, and here it will show you how that will be received. But if you're receiving compensation, it does have to go through your brokerage. You can't just have them Venmo you directly. That is a compensation and goes through the brokerage. So there's more complication with that because you have to have it go through accounting. You have to cut checks. There's costs engaged with that. So there is a fee, a 20% fee for those showing fees that you're charging your potential buyers with the Realtypath.
Josh, can I mention to that real fast? So for those of you who may do property management here and there, that's our standard fee that we've had. So property management, transaction coordination, BPOs, anything that comes in as typically a fixed cost, we usually have charged an 80-20 split. Okay. The same holds true for this. So if somebody says, well, yeah, I'd just like you to open doors for me and I'll pay you $100 for every time, we charge $20 of that $100. Okay. So that's been a question that's come up. We're not seeing this in practice. A lot of agents want to get the much bigger commission. So they're trying to build rapport with clients. and they'll just do will not receive compensation. So,
How would they actually?
how would the client pay? Yeah. Yeah, well, so that's a good question. How would you get them to pay if they've agreed to it? I mean, the question is it worth going through the court of laws for $300? Probably not. That would be like an hour of attorney's fees. But if you had something up front, I'll show you this home for $300. I'll show you 10 homes for $300. And the client goes, sure. And we'd have to set up payment, which we can do. It's a little bit of a hassle. I really think a very low percentage of agents are going to charge to show a property. Yeah.
So what about agents? This may not even make sense. What about agents that are on Realtypath agents, the Facebook groups, and they're like, can someone show my listing tonight? I'll pay you $50. Like, how does that? Because I'm like, I see that all the time.
So that is one of those ones that is a little interesting. There is a school of thought that those should be run through the brokerage, but it's not a client to agent compensation. It's an agent to agent compensation. And there's even those who would say, well, shouldn't that be considered a referral fee? Agents aren't supposed to be paying agents. The question is it contingent upon a commission being paid? And the answer is no. It's a service for somebody opening a door. So we've run this past our attorney before. She said there could be some attorneys who would interpret that as actual real estate compensation. We look at it as a services fee because we see that all the time. Agents will be like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, show a property for me. I'll pay you $20 to open this door. As of now, 30, 40.
Yeah,
Up the
put
bid,
some
right?
inflation there, Dave.
From what we understand, it's not a violation. So.
So to be clear in that situation, right, this scenario, open a door for me, assuming that person referring you that say, go open this door for me has a buyer broker agreement in place, you don't need to have one to open the door.
Correct, because it's company,
Right.
it's for the company.
Wanted to
Yep,
clarify that.
exactly. Okay.
Okay, so now we're at the real estate brokerage commission agreement, and then we'll go over the Rep C, and then we'll go into these scenarios and role playing. So
Okay. So let's start out real fast with the real estate brokerage commission agreement. If you have one of these signed, do you need to put anything into section 4.3E of the Rep C? No, you don't. Because in 4.3E, it states that it's in addition to. Okay. So if you have this and you put something in 4.3E, that poor client's going to be paying double. So
Dave, what happens if I place an offer on the Rep C and I put this in conjunction and they sign just the Rep C, but not the compensation, and I don't fill out section 4.3 EI?
Then you may not receive any compensation.
So what would be your advice when
that occurs?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. What would you suggest? Do you suggest using this form and sending that first to get signed, or do you fill out section 4.3?
So when I spoke to Curtis Bullock, he said that their hope to clean up everything that would come out of this settlement was that this would be used in practice. What he's reported back to me is it's not. Most agents are just filling out section 4.3E and putting compensation in there. And I don't fault them because it's right there. It's part of the offer. If you're asking for my recommendation, honestly, I don't care. I just don't want you to miss either of them. Otherwise, you won't get compensated. So
one of the differences, and I'll give you the question, is down here, you have to have both brokerages acknowledge this and the buyer and the seller acknowledge this. If it's in an offer, they just respond back and accept or counter. So you don't have to have multiple parties engaged in a time frame. So that's where one of the concerns I have as a broker, seeing they're going to send this thing out and the other offer, and someone signs the offer, this doesn't get signed. Now you're potentially not getting that commission. So I would, my personal thoughts is focus on putting in 4.3
in the Rep C. And I was going to say, it's just easier to do that. You're drafting up the contract regardless. 4.3, it saves you a step. You don't even need this.
So 4.3, that's the rep C, or that's the rep C one,
Yes,
so
not
the
this.
offer one.
Yep.
Okay. And so that's where, so like if you, because some sellers are wanting to pay 0, right, to the buyers. And so then you as the buyer's representative are going to be like, well, no, my buyers want you to pay something. And so that's where you would put that in 4.3
Correct.
and then just not worry about that other one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Because if the seller agrees, if they sign the rep C and it has your compensation in section 4.3, they've agreed to it.
Okay. And then
Yep.
they would change that if they didn't want to pay however much you're asking, they would just do that in an addendum.
In an addendum. Yep. Yes. And this is I will repeat this because this is worth hearing multiple times. In the past, it was a big no-no to include any compensation as part of the real estate purchase contract. You would hear brokers say all the time, no, compensation is between brokerages. That's no longer the case. Compensation is between all the parties involved: buyer, seller, buyer's agents, brokerage, sellers, brokerage. So, good question.
All right, so there's real estate purchase contract.
Josh, can I mention something real fast that I meant to earlier? You don't have to raise your hands, but I'm sure a fair amount of you have received the late notice form before, right? Just so you're aware, we are strongly being advised by our attorney to actually have some type of financial penalty, because we're starting to see a few lawsuits pop up for documents that aren't submitted within 4 calendar days. Okay. That means the Division of Real Estate requires you, when you're representing somebody, to submit your transaction within 4 calendar days of signing. Okay. Now, when I say transaction, I don't just mean real estate purchase contract. I mean agency agreements. You get an agency agreement, you get a showing form. We need it within 4 calendar days. Okay. If you don't, what do you get? You get a little slap on the hand.
Had a listing, I put it up like after 6 days, I got fined $200.
Who fined you? Was it the division?
Yeah.
Okay. Ouch. Yeah. So the division fined her $200 for not having all of her agency documents submitted to the brokerage within 4 calendar days. No. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Just know that we haven't instituted anything like that, but we did. One of our most recent errors and omissions lawsuits that we dealt with was an attorney who made a really good case, who said, we've looked at this particular agent's files. We had to present multiple files on one agent. And guess what? On those multiple files, guess what he had on every single one? The late notice form. And that the attorney for the plaintiff came back to us and said, what are you guys doing about this? And we're like, oh, we're just doing a naughty boy late notice. So then our attorney for the defendant came back and said, you guys really should have some type of penalty for repeat offenders. So, and we're thinking of being very lenient. We're thinking of like 10 late notice forms, but number 11 comes along, it's a $20 fee. Something very simple. And the idea behind that is we're going to avoid those grievance ethics hearings with agents who aren't getting showing forms if all those documents are submitted within 4 calendar days. Okay.
Yeah, we have a question over here.
Oh, Cesar.
A little bit confused about the broker's agreement compensation, the one before that one.
The one before this one?
Yeah. So let's say if I put an offer today with the rep C, and the listing agent is paying 1% commission. So I'm gonna go back to ask for 2.5 or 3%. So if I go back to negotiating my compensation, so I need to have the other form, the compensation agreement.
Great question. So you can have potentially one of 3 scenarios. Okay. One, you can use the real estate compensation agreement to just stipulate the total amount. What'd you say total? 2% total? Is that what you said?
2.5.
2.5. So going from 1% to 2.5. You can just use that agreement Or if the listing agent gives you a real estate compensation agreement, says this shows 1%. If you wanted that additional 1.5, this is scenario number 2, you would put it into this section right here. And what you would put is 1.5, assuming that you already had that compensation agreement showing 1%, because 1 plus 1.5 would be 2.5. Now, if they don't give you a compensation agreement, but you want 2.5, what are you going to do? You're going to put it in here. You're going to put 2.5 in here. Okay. Now, say scenario number 3. Scenario number 3, let's say you have a compensation agreement that's been established at 1%. Maybe you've already completed the real estate purchase contract. You're trying to get an additional 1.5% paid through the transaction. You could use that real estate payment addendum that is also on the MLS. So there's multiple scenarios. What's the easiest? Just this, 4.3E. Just put in the total compensation that you want right here, and then start the negotiation process there. Because in addition to all the terms that the buyer's trying to negotiate, the seller could counter negotiating your commission. So I think the easiest, rather than using multiple forms, is just right in the rep sheet. And that's what Josh was saying too. And by the way, if the seller's a stick in the mud and you're trying to get that additional 1.5%, what do you have to do? You can call me, but I'm going to give you the same answer. You got to get your buyer to pay it, and which they've agreed to, right? If you have a buyer broker agreement that says 2.5 and you're only getting 1%, and you're for sure wanting to get that additional 1.5, you'd have to turn to your buyer and say, I'm worth my hire. I want you to pay me that additional 1.5, and you could enforce that if you so choose, you know. Yeah, and that's where, going back to this gentleman's question about the wild, wild west, that's where you have to pick and choose as an agent. Do you want to kill a deal? Mm-hmm. You know, do you want a long-term client? And I know that's usually the mentality that we have is maybe I'm willing to take less now for the benefit of this being a lead source, right? I mean, we've got amazing top producers in this room. And every time I ask you guys, where do you get your business from? It's usually repeat business referrals. And sometimes we have to take it in the shorts on one, and so we get it more on another. So.
Okay, just to answer your question real quick, Amanda, you would do a counter to the Rep C and reference section 4.3 EI to adjust that commission in there. So.
Correct. Yeah. And addenda can start the negotiation process. You know, if you throw in an amount here that's unacceptable to the seller, the seller could just counter on addendum 2 or 3 or whatever the sequence is, right? And just say, we don't agree to the commission in section 4.3 EI. We want it to be X. And then you could go back and forth.
So, yeah, and this is going to take us to some role playing. There's some frequently asked questions that we get from our agents about how to. Oh, go ahead.
Can I interject real fast before we jump into that? When you're negotiating addenda, I'm not mad at you if you get up to addendum 7 or 8. I do strongly believe you could have avoided addendum 5, 6, 7, or 8. You know, those high numbers. If you just call and verbally negotiate, just verbally negotiate it, hash it out on the phone, and then put it into writing, right? Statute of frauds, right? Statute of frauds is what? Everything must be in writing, okay? Which means that, you know, you're going to put, even though you're negotiating verbally, you still need to put it into writing, but save yourself the back and forth, right? Just call and say, what is your seller willing to pay? I want 2.5. Well, they're only willing to pay 2.25. Will he go 2.35? Sure. Okay, I'll put that in an addendum. Save yourself the back and forth.
My record's 21. And the title company is just like, oh my gosh, what have you done here? Yeah, question.
I won't go live.
We would do one thing, maybe like count there. Fine, we'll take that. We're going to do this. And there's some back and forth.
Oh gosh.
I don't intend to put this to practice, but the dreaded text message voicemail of 2.5 is confirmed.
Yeah.
Is that?
Are you asking
Enforceable.
if that can be legally enforceable?
Right.
Yeah, you probably heard me mention this
Mhm.
in the previous class. The Division of Real Estate has changed their code to say that things that are in writing, like text messages or emails, can be used. They can be legally binding, you know. Here's my thought though. If you have a text that says 2.5, but then you have an addendum days later that say 2.25, based on sequence, we can safely assume that what you've agreed to is 2.25, right? But where I think that would be upheld in a court of law would be a scenario where maybe you didn't get all final signatures, but you did get something from the listing agent said, yeah, they're willing to pay 2.5, and maybe you screwed up and you're like, oh my goodness, I meant to put it in the real estate purchase contract and I never did. And it's still an uphill battle. Just make sure it gets into the agreement at some point. So.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay,
You and I are role playing now?
Yeah, we're gonna do some role
Okay.
playing. So one of the questions people have is, hey, I'm not used to negotiating if someone doesn't want to pay that, and how do I explain that? So here's some questions we have, and we'll kind of role play them. The first one, does this mean I have to pay you? Okay. Yes, it does. Make sure that is crystal clear. If I don't sign the buyer broker agreement, will you not show me the property? So that's up to you. Yeah. If you are willing to do a showing agreement, a limited showing agreement, that's up to you. But you do have to have something legally signed. And so you can explain it to them, say, I have to have this signed to be able to show you this for your protection, for my protection.
Josh, can I role play this
Yeah.
one with you real fast?
Yeah, let's do it.
You're the client, I'm the agent. Here's what I'd say. Let's add a little flair to this. You say to me, what if the seller's not willing to pay your commission? What happens then? Okay. Let's say you ask me that. Do you want me to be the agent or do you want to be the agent?
No, you can be the agent.
Okay,
It's fine.
good. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, am I gonna have to pay you if the seller won't pay the commission?
Yes, according to the buyer broker agreement, you would have to pay me. Now, my goal is that no matter what, we're gonna get it into the contract, okay? My goal is so you don't have to come out of pocket.
Okay, so what if they don't accept, like if you negotiate in and they're not willing to, like, what do we do then?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hate to be the reason for which you don't get a property. So I'm gonna do everything in my power to negotiate an offer on your behalf, okay? I want you to know I'm worth my hire. I work hard. We're gonna do our best, okay? What I highly recommend is that we take it scenario by scenario. My experience is that most sellers are willing to work with me, okay? Whether or not that's increasing the purchase price, or maybe I have to take a discount commission. Why don't we cross that bridge when we get there? That sound good?
Okay. So one of the things I've seen too in this scenario is if you want to explain your expertise, a lot of people don't understand what you do. Even after I've explained to a lot of clients, they still don't know what I'm doing for them. So explaining, hey, I'm not here to just open doors for you. I'm an expert. I help with inspections so you know what's potentially going to go wrong with your property so you can walk away. I guide you through the process of working with the title company, making sure your lender's on board so you don't miss a deadline, so you don't lose your earnest money. There's so many facets here that I am an expert in. You've really got to do a better job at pitching your expertise to your clients. Explain that up front. This is where I spent many years. I've been certified, done all these things, so that way I can protect you in every scenario that could possibly come up. Well, one example of a funny scenario that came up yesterday was koi fish. These are very expensive fish. Are they to be?
Real example, by the way.
Yeah, real example. The seller said they left it. The buyers wanted it. They got there the next day. The koi fish were gone. These are thousands of dollar fish, which I didn't know that was how expensive they were. But is it included? They said they were going to leave it, but was it in the inclusions? Is it in the exclusions? Those are some of the things that you learn from experience as an agent, and explain to people. There's so many facets of the job that comes from my many years of experience that are going to protect you in this scenario. So
can I share a real life example? So shortly after the market crash, I was representing a buyer on a very large home, 12,000 square foot home in Bluffdale. I made a big mistake. I didn't know I made a mistake, but I did. There was a home automation system in the utility room, huge rack with multiple apparati of different devices. Home automation system was at the top, and then there was like a disc changer and a stereo system and so on and so forth. All I put in the inclusion sections was home automation system. So when they closed and my buyers moved in, at the very top of this rack was just one apparatus. Everything else was gone. Over $20,000 in equipment. My clients asked me to pay for that. My commission was not even that. And I just said, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I really apologize. But oh my goodness, did I learn a lesson? Now my inclusion section, like you only have like 2 lines. I will even say like see addendum X, you know, and then in that addendum, I'm just outlining every inclusion. So
The court's behind the system.
yes, the core. Yeah, yes. Be very detailed. Be very, very detailed. Yeah. Well, fixtures. So you bring up a good point. Fixtures you don't need to worry about. Are koi fish fixtures?
No.
No. In fact, what we found out is they're considered pets, which should go with the seller. Now, the twist to that story, guess what we found out? The seller left the koi fish. They were stolen. Isn't that terrible? Stolen, yeah. So, but now the buyers want the seller to pay for the koi fish, but the sellers have a leg up because they're like, well, they're our pets and they were stolen anyway. So, yeah.
So yeah, the next one, I'll be the,
You'll be the agent?
Yeah, I'll be the agent on this one. So if you don't sign the.
Okay, so Josh, I really like you. I appreciate, you know, the dialogue we've had. You seem very knowledgeable in the real estate industry. I'm just a little concerned. I don't really want to commit myself to anybody right now. Does that mean you won't show me this home I want to see if I don't sign something with you?
So I legally have to have a documentation showing that I represent you in this property. And the only other option I have, which I don't do, is I could do a showing agreement just to show that you're the property.
Mm-hmm.
But my expertise is not in opening doors for you. I spent many years in the field. My expertise is in doing negotiations, helping you with contracts, looking deep into the property from my many years of experience, understanding what could go wrong to protect you. And so when you sign this agreement, it allows for me to have fiduciary responsibilities to look out for your best interest. And
Okay.
so I'm not willing to, you know, go and just show a property to open the door and not represent you fully. It's not for your best interest, nor is it for mine. And you have to ask yourself this question. If an example would be, if you're going to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, are you going to order a cheeseburger like from McDonald's? That's what you're asking me to do. Say, I got all this knowledge and expertise, and you just want me to open a door for you. You're not utilizing my skill set. And
So I am confused though. A week ago, I had an agent show a property for me and he didn't have me sign anything. What? I don't understand.
And then that's quite concerning because legally they are supposed to have you sign something. And so I'm not willing to, you know, draw those lines. I want to protect you, and I'm not going to also step over boundaries that could get me into trouble. I make sure that you're protected, and I know the laws that are incorporated with that. So if that is happening, you probably should not be trusting that individual to represent you legally as a real estate professional.
Okay, great. The only other thing I would add is, as you're trying to land this person, ask if it was a listing agent. Was it the listing agent who showed you?
Yeah.
And if they go, oh yeah, it was the person selling the home, then you say, that's totally allowable. But for us buyers agents, we do need to have a showing agreement. Okay.
Now, so this takes us to the next thing. So now I'll be the client. So can I just call the listing agent? Yeah. So if well, Dave, can't I just call the listing agent and have them show me the property?
Yeah, you can. Here's the downside to that, okay? The listing agent represents the seller. They have the seller's interests at heart. Their goal is to get the most money for the seller as possible, okay? You going directly to them, that's fine as far as being able to get into the home. But the issue is if you tried to negotiate directly with that listing agent, just remember they're always protecting the interests of their client, which isn't you.
Won't that save me money on paying a commission though?
You know, it really shouldn't, because most listing agreements incorporate a buyer's agent's compensation. So, in fact, the majority of them do, which is awesome. My goal, once again, is I don't want to get in the way of you getting a home. So I know I'm worth my hire. I'm going to do everything I can to help you negotiate the best offer, and also make it so you don't have to come out of pocket for my compensation. Part of that is negotiating my compensation when we make an offer.
Perfect. One of the things I've seen here too is helping them understand is that, hey, if you're going in at this, they already have this, what you mentioned, Dave, they will already have an expectation that there's going to be negotiations for commission. If you're not represented, they're going to say, okay, I can negotiate that out. Or they will try to do a limited agency and say, look, what's going to happen is then they'll just represent you as a limited agent and not fight for your best interest because they won't be legally allowed to. And they're still going to take that commission, which doesn't benefit you in any way. It actually is more detrimental than anything. So I think explain that would be super helpful in that scenario. So
yeah, and will listing agents try to double side? Sure, why not? You know, but I think your explanation is awesome. That's helping people to realize, like, oh, this person doesn't have my best interest. They can't really give me a lot of advice. They're limited in what they can advise. Right.
So that takes us to another question. Then we'll open up for any other questions here. I just found, I'll just find another agent who's willing to show me the house for a flat fee. Okay. So if you're unwilling to do that, you know, or if you're not willing to show them, say, well, if I don't represent you, I'm not willing to take the time to do that. How do we represent that? So.
Well, that's easy. You want to do a flat fee? I can see here your average price point's 500,000. I'll do it for 15 grand. Flat fee.
It's sold.
The way I would respond to that is, anytime I meet with a newer agent, let me back up for a moment. Anytime a newer agent comes to me and says, what's the best thing I can do to get my career off the ground? I always say specialize, and don't be afraid to lose business. There are so many clients I look back on and I'm like, I would have never worked with them. They were a pain in the rear. It's okay. If someone's coming at you saying, well, I'll just find an agent that works for a flat fee. My example I just gave sounds ludicrous, but maybe it's not. Well, what flat fee? Well, I don't want to pay anybody more than 8 grand. Okay, I'll work for 8 grand. You have to ask yourself that question, you know, but flat fee. Well, I don't want to pay anything more than $500. You know what? I'm not the agent for you. I'm just going to tell you that right now. My time is well worth more than $500.
And see, and this is super important. If you explain this to someone, think about any of the experts. If you're going to, I don't know, we'll just say a specialist in, I don't know, facelifts or something. Well, at least that was a great example. Aesthetics, yes. Obviously, I've never done that. So if you go to that individual and you're like, hey, person next door said that they'll do it for $5,000 cheaper. And like, well, I'll beat them by $2,000. What do you start to think? Okay, with quality. So you can just say, hey, there's plenty of people who will do a job for you for very little. I'm not worried about my quantity. I'm worried about my quality of workmanship. Those people are going to be doing tons of people working with them. You won't have time of day. They're going to overlook stuff. And if you're in a rush and you just show something, I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to be in a baseball game, say, see you later, son. Sorry. Hopefully you don't hit a home run. I got to go open this house to make it happen. Is that the kind of quality you're going to get from someone you're going to pay $500 to show a house? Mm-hmm. And will they be knowledgeable? Someone who knows the worth isn't going to undercut their value. And so you explain those things to somebody, help them walk through it. Don't brush past it. A lot of agents struggle to confront commissions, and they're like, well, I'm a little nervous to talk about it. If you actually confront the issue with them head on, they know that this is an issue in their mind. If you address it and say, hey, I'm sure this is one of the concerns you have. I want to address it so there's no questions here. Let's talk through this. Now you become the outlet for them out of that situation where they felt trapped. So now you're in tandem with them and you build that sense of trust with that individual rather than saying, well, yeah, we'll talk about commissions a little bit later. Maybe we'll address it. Then it creates anxiety with that individual. Address it forthright. So,
yeah, I love that. Yeah. By the way, we have seen agents do compensation that caps. That's not unreasonable, you know, hey, if I work, I saw one addendum once that I think said something along the lines of, if I work with you more than 3 months, it's 3% of the acquisition price. If it's less than 3 months, I cap out at something like 10 grand, you know? You can get creative, you know? And this going back to the question about the wild, wild west, I think if it's a race to the bottom of the barrel, our industry will end up being like used car salesman. So strike that from there too. But it doesn't have to be. We do a lot of work. You know, like I like to say, I'm worth my hire. I think you're worth your hire. And it's okay to just push back and just say, you know what, I'm going to do a lot of work. But you can get creative. You can think through things, you know. There are scenarios where is 3% of a $30 million sales price too high? Subjectively, some of you would probably say yes. Would I be delighted to make 50 grand on a $30 million commission? Maybe. That's still a lot of money, you know. It's all subjective, right? It's subjective. But I think there are scenarios where you can dangle a more enticing carrot in front of your client to become more competitive.
To address that too, if you are offering to do something for someone, make sure you put that in your exclusive right to sell listing agreement, because you need to actually follow through with what you offer to do for them. You can't just say, I'm going to hold 6 open houses and you hold 1. If you're going to offer it, you need to put it down and keep that in mind. So we do have another question here. If you can't negotiate the seller to pay your buyer's agent commission, and now the buyer has to pay it, is there an additional form we have to use for the buyer broker?
No, because the buyer broker agreement already stipulates that amount of compensation must be paid. So there's nothing in addition that you need. You're just basically going to your buyer and enforcing it. And I will say this about the lending industry. I think the lending industry is kind of holding off and waiting and seeing what happens, because there have been talks about lenders financing compensation, just in case there's a seller who says that they won't. So I think we will see that go into practice. We just haven't yet seen a real life example of that. It is a hard conversation to have, and it's a really hard conversation if the buyer goes, I don't have 12 grand to bring to the table, you know?
So last question, and then we'll wrap things up. So people have been asking about, can I have just concessions put into the contract rather than just stipulating the commission, and let the buyers decide how they want those concessions used?
Not if you're looking for absolute compensation. If you leave it open-ended like that, because it is allowable through the lawsuit to just state that concessions will be offered. That's the one thing that can be said on the remarks section of a listing, is that concessions can be used, and then the buyer can choose how they want concessions used. But if you're wanting specific compensation, you can't leave it open-ended.
Right.
Oh.
Thank you. Now with this new contract, so since we can take buyers everywhere, so I can take a buyer to Park City, and that I don't need to be part of the Park City board. So what is that change?
So you've got a couple questions layered in there. Let me answer the last one first. Is there the good old boys club like there was in the past where, well, let me back up. If you wanted to be a part of the Park City board, your whole company had to be in the past. They did away with that. The same was true with the Washington County board. And that's what I mean by the good old boys club. No offense to you, Washington County agents or Park City agents, if you're on this Zoom call. That's been done away with. You can now become a part of any board that is within your jurisdiction. So jurisdiction meaning where you're licensed, which is the state of Utah. So you want to be a part of the Park City board, you can be a part of the Park City board, Washington County board, it doesn't matter. And the reason why I'm talking about them specifically is they have their own MLS system. Okay, the Park City has its own MLS. The Washington County board operates off of the Flex MLS. Okay, my experience has been that both of the agents within those geographical regions have dual membership in the WFR MLS or UtahRealestate.com because they want to give their client as much exposure as possible. But in the past, you would have scenarios where, especially down in St. George, we'd have scenarios where agents would say, I'm not compensating you. You're not a part of my board. And they could legally do that. That is, it's not to say it's no longer allowed. It's now that compensation is part of the contract. It doesn't matter where you write up the offer. You have the ability to write up the offer. Now, I will say this, that boards do control the super access still, and I don't think that's been changed. So that's where I think you still have to have secondary membership, but I'll have to double check. I know that a lot of our agents have secondary membership in both the Washington County Board and in the Park City Board. You do have to pay the fees. So like, for example, if you want to show properties in Park City, I think you do need to be a part of their board as a secondary member so you can access their super lock boxes.
Unless it's listed on both Utah Real Estate and at the, because then they would have their separate access, and a lot of them will have more than one lockbox.
Yeah.
So,
but you'll want to call and ask, because the lockbox, my understanding is the lockbox is specific to the board that it was registered. And if it was registered in the Park City Board and you're trying to access it as a non-Park City Board member, you may not be able to access it. So that would be a question to ask the listing agent. And Park City is funny anyways, because I've realized, I had a buyer there once, and I realized that the listing agent always wants to be there. And I did not have secondary membership. And I was like, hey, we want to see your home. Great. When do you want to see it? We'll be there. And I'm like, yes. But I'm like, I don't have to pay my secondary member. I'm now a secondary member, obviously. But yeah, those, I wonder if we'll see that just be like, if you're in the state of Utah, all the boards will mesh their super lock boxes. That's the one thing that kind of keeps things a little separate. The secondary membership, I think, is required for different board systems, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. All right, well, that takes us to the close of our meeting today. Again, there's some tacos, yummy tacos out back, thanks to Warren McClare.